Kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News with just me tonight and Nala. There you go. Just the two of us. Hey, doing well? Hope you're well. Hope things are going along well. Have a good long weekend. Did you do anything special for the long weekend? I did not. I hosted a couple of episodes of BHN Dunedin where we talked to a couple of mayoralty candidates. One was the incumbent mayor, Aaron Hawkins. The second was a young fella, actually, and it kind of dovetails into a conversation we're going to have tonight. Young fella by the name of Jet Krasinski. He's only 19, and he's giving it a go for mayor. Now, the reason it dovetails into tonight's conversation is that you've probably seen on the title of tonight's show, Heather du Plessis-Allan going mean girls on a 16-year-old. Honestly, I've just I'll show you what I've got. I've got this this new system. It's called a cart wall. And what a cart wall is, that one there. What a cart wall is, it's an old radio term for when people had these things like this. So this is the cart wall here, and you can just fire off audio, and you push play on it, and it fires it off. Like
Your
that.
feelings don't really matter.
But
right
the problem
now
is,
we're talking about
I can't pause it. So see, this one here is 1:44 long, right? I push play, and then I push like this.
Am I allowed to go to Fiji? Is that
and then
necessary?
I push pause, and it fades it out slowly. So I've just re-listened back to everything, and the conversation that we're going to get into in a minute or two with Heather du Plessis-Allan has infuriated me. And what I would like to be able to do is to push pause on the 1.5-minute clip and take a breath, but I can't because I'll get a different cart wall at some stage. But the cart wall that I have, if you push pause, it just fades it out slowly. So then again, if I push pause and it faded it out slowly, I'd have to start right back from the start. So you and I are going to have to listen to the whole 1:44 of that conversation, and it has infuriated me. I listened to it this afternoon when I was editing it. This audio has been, I think, pretty much been scrubbed from the News Talk ZB website because it's that bad. I think so, because it's nowhere on their website. I have a copy of it. So we're going to play it so you can see it, what hubbub's going on about that shortly. Anyway, I was talking about the weekends. And of course, what's your Blacks on Saturday night? And they were phenomenal. Other than that, it's been a weekend of running the dog. Dog got 2 runs today at the park. And chilling out, actually. A non-children weekend with me. Kids are back with their mum, and just a nice kind of chilled, laid back time. Happy to hear from you guys in the chat if you want to tell us what you got up to in your long weekend, if anything. A bunch of people coming in now. David coming in saying, good day. Glad you're covering the Izzy Cook interview. Absolutely, David. And if you haven't heard the audio yet, it's going to infuriate you. I'm telling you, the Mean Girls label is 100% accurate. So if you haven't heard it yet, you will hear what I'm going to play, and you will feel like making an official complaint to the Broadcasting Standards Authority. Like the Broadcasting Standards Authority is really for broadcasting, right? It doesn't apply to us. We can say whatever we want. That's why we can swear and curse and do whatever we want, because there's no broadcasting standards on the internet. Unfortunately, it's also why other internet broadcasters like Sean Plunkett can get away with horrific behavior and treating their guests like utter scum, because there's no one to complain to. So it has its pros and its cons. Likewise, the Broadcasting Standards, which is a bit of a toothless animal, has its pros and cons the other way as well, because if you are broadcasting into using a terrestrial signal, you're a part of the mainstream media. When I say you get held accountable, it's not like it can fine you. There's no legal recourses, but it's like a governing body that says, yeah, this was not good. The clip I'm going to play you, or the clips, plural, I'm going to play you, I'm going to make a complaint to the Broadcasting Standards Authority, because it is absolutely repugnant. It is one of, if not the most disgusting interviews I've ever heard, with a 35, 36, 37-year-old mother of one professional broadcaster, journalist of some repute, basically demeaning a 16-year-old on her radio show. It is utterly disgusting. And when I listened to it this afternoon, I'm just being honest with you, when I listened to it this afternoon, I had this knot in my stomach, this visceral feeling of how angry I became when I heard it. I'm not doing this now just to kind of beat up on you and say, hey, so stay listening, because we're going to do it first, right? So you're not going to have to hang around, but we're going to do it first. I'm just giving you a background as to what it was. And then what I'm also going to do is, because I spoke to a 19-year-old in the weekend who wants to be mayor of Dunedin, I kind of feel like that I've got a bit of a perspective to bring when a seasoned broadcaster, and no matter what people on the Dunedin news page think about me, I'm a seasoned broadcaster with 20 plus years experience, including 12 plus years in news and current affairs. How you handle a young person. Because young people, I mean, if I was being flippant and cheeky and sitting around in a pub, I'd go, "Oh, young people are stupid." I wouldn't mean that in an offensive way. All I'm saying is their ideas aren't fully formed. They're aspirational rather than like logical and pragmatic. They have these big ideas, because what young people are doing is they're trying to find their footing. They're just starting to play with their political leanings and where they sit. And you have to be careful as a broadcaster not to just kind of go, you fucking idiot, which is basically the vibe of the conversation. Shouldn't use those terms, obviously, because there's a Broadcasting Standards Authority. And I'm going to give you an example from the conversation with Jet. And look, with the greatest of respect to Jet, he's not going to be the mayor of Dunedin. He didn't have many answers to the questions. And so we actually changed the interview slightly to make it a bit more of an aspirational, what do you aspire to, rather than give me the numbers, because he didn't have the numbers. Whereas Heather du Plessis-Allan goes completely Lindsay Lohan and 100% Mean Girls and asks ridiculous questions and demeans a 16-year-old who was trying to do something for good. Now, remember, whether you agree or disagree with the political stance, and it is a political stance that some of these young people are taking, what they're aiming to do. Now, you might roll your eyes when you hear this if you're not a fan of it, but they're fighting to heal the world. They're fighting to look after the vulnerable, and they're fighting to have a place and space that's healthy for their generation in 20 years from now. Now, you might roll your eyes and go, well, whatever, young people, but that's where they're at right now. When I play the audio for you, when you hear the demeaning nature of the conversation, if it doesn't get you angry, I would suggest, a little bit politely, but not really politely, that maybe you want to check yourself before you rickety wreck yourself. Now, where I heard, let's just get into it. Me and Nala will be hosting the show tonight. This is about it. And Jay, just so you know, so Jay's asking this question. I'm going to talk about Plunkett's revolting comments, minimising the actions of the Christchurch terrorist. I wasn't planning on talking about that tonight, and one of the reasons I wasn't planning on talking about it tonight is I'm probably with Chewy tomorrow night, and Chewy is someone who me and him have talked quite a bit about Sean Plunkett and about the abomination of a broadcaster he is. But just before we do that, I will show you one thing, because I put this tweet out this evening. If I can even find it. I don't know if I can find it. Where is it gone? Did I click on media? Tweets and replies. Is that the one? That'll be the one. Here. I'll just show you it. Look, so for Jay, come back tomorrow night, all right? But this is a tweet I put out tonight about that exact conversation, right? Sean Plunkett, this is a quote from Sean Plunkett. Brenton Tarrant was not convicted of terrorism, right? And that's part of the conversation around what he's been saying and what is being reported he's been saying. Then I've tweeted out, court decision from justice.govt.nz. The sentence for Tarrant included, quote, life imprisonment on a charge of engaging in a terrorist act. And as I've said, don't believe me. Here it is. Sean Plunkett, he wasn't a terrorist. The literal sentence, life imprisonment on the charge of engaging in a terrorist act. We'll see how humble Mr. Plunkett can be when he has to retract the statement that he wasn't charged or convicted of terrorism, because it's literally in the result or the charge or the whatever you call it, the conviction. And I guess, as I said, I think we'll talk about that tomorrow night, because I know Chewy will want to have a crack at that. And also, I think actually we're already going to be piling on what appears to be, like if you would have said to me a couple of years ago when Heather Plessis-Allan was working for TVNZ, where she sat politically, I wouldn't be able to tell you. But what appears to be more and more and more and more and more like a let's just say sympathetic right-wing commentator at the moment. I mean, I know others may want to go further than that, but let's just say sympathetic right-wing commentator at the moment. Before I get into this, let's just have a look at any. Now, because it's just me, there might be a few gaps like this as I'm trying to read the messages coming in to see if anybody has said anything. It's just all good evening at the moment. So thank you, guys. People saying good on you for interviewing young people. Well, look, I'm interviewing the 11 candidates for mayor. All right. Let's get into this, shall we? See, Chewy's not here, so my introduction doesn't take 28 minutes. I didn't know what had happened until the weekend with this Heather Plessis-Allan situation. I saw this story in Spinoff over the weekend. This story in Spinoff is titled, Heather Plessis-Allan should be ashamed of how she bullied my daughter. So that, of course, pricked the ears up. We didn't do a show last night because we were off celebrating the Queen. So tonight's the first chance we've had to talk about it after the weekend. I will come back to this because there is a bit at the end here that I think is warranting of reading. But I would like to play you some audio. And because it's just audio, because I believe News Talk ZB, they either never uploaded it, which I find problematic because they upload everything, or I think what's more likely is they deleted it in the weekend. So I have audio to play for you, and I'll probably just leave this picture there while I'm playing the audio because it's literally just an audio file off the cut wall, and you can have a listen for yourself. So there's a few clips to play. The first clip is actually really interesting because it's Heather Plessis-Allan talking to Izzy Cook. You know how we talked about this as well when we were talking about how there was that $5,000 fee for traffic engagement if they were going to march in the streets. And we talked about that and we were like, the council's not going to pay for it. They have to pay for it. What are they going to do? Well, News Talk ZB talked to Izzy about that as well. And I want to just play this in its entirety. It's only 90 seconds because I want you to hear the tone of Heather Plessis-Allan in this one. She's very engaging. She's very nice. She's very encouraging. And I think this all just adds to the abhorrent nature of the second interview. So this is before the strike, the Schools for Climate strike. I don't know the title of that. I keep getting it wrong. Before they did it, when the news came out that the council wanted $5,000 out of these teenagers if they were going to have a hold of it. Have a listen to this. So this is the first interview. This is before it happened. This is not the interview that we're going to look at more closely.
Wellington school students will have to foot a $5,000 bill if they want to protest climate inaction. The School Strike for Climate group had planned to walk to Parliament next Friday, but they don't have the money to pay for the private traffic management services to safely protest. Izzy Cook is one of the organisers. Hi, Izzy.
Hi.
So you guys can't pull together $5,000?
No, it's pretty difficult. We've asked some other organisations for funding, but yeah, it's not looking like we're going to get there.
What did they say? They can't afford to help?
Well, most of the organisations that we talk to are actually really generous. They do give us a bit of money, but $5,000 is a lot of money to raise.
Yeah. Wellington City Council, is it fair enough? They paid for the last two protests. Is it fair enough that they don't pay for this one?
It's definitely a pretty complicated issue. Wellington City Council has said to us that they can't afford to fund this one. Which is interesting, but I think one of the biggest issues is that, of course, as school students or, people under the age of 18, we can't vote. So it's one of our few ways of kind of expressing our opinions in a democratic society. So it makes things difficult for us, for sure.
What are you going to do instead if you can't march?
So in Wellington, the protest has changed to just being a rally that meets at Parliament at 12 p.m.
And that you don't need any traffic management for that?
No, we don't.
Yeah, and good thing Trevor Mallard's not there in case he turns the sprinklers on you, eh?
Yeah, probably.
Jokey joke.
Good on you, Izzy. Best of luck. That Izzy Cook, Climate Strike for Climate, or rather School Strike for Climate, right. Wellington organiser.
So it was lighthearted. It was Fred. It was a minute 42, and it was like, oh, well done, good on you. Yep, go for it. It was nice. Yeah, it was lighthearted. And then of course they did their strike for climate change. And Izzy Cook comes back on ZB. And if that's your experience of being on ZB, biggest radio station in the country, dominant in all forces of media, you'd be like, oh, last time I spoke to Heather, that she was nice, that was fine. The story that her mother wrote, or the article or post that her mother put out, basically looks like that Izzy didn't even tell her parents that she was going on ZB. I mean, maybe she should have, but I guess if you've just had that lovely interaction, maybe you wouldn't think twice about it. So this is the interview after the strike. And I'm not playing the whole thing, but I've picked out a couple of salient points because there's one part that everyone's talking about, which is the demeaning part. So the tone has changed, and Heather du Plessis-Allan tries to nail down the 16-year-old with specifics and snidey sideways comments. Like I think at the end of this clip, when they're talking about feeding the world, she goes, okay, so they can go hungry. Just think about, if you've seen the movie Mean Girls, just think about Mean Girls, or think about that bitchy girl in school that always wanted to get the last word in and always wanted to kind of to finish with a mocking comment as opposed to an actual conversation. So this is the latest conversation on Friday. Heather du Plessis-Allan talking to Izzy about how we're going to feed people.
How many people does our dairy and beef
I am going to
feed?
stop there. It's going to pause. It's going to come back. But one thing I forgot to mention, and please, if you don't see it, obviously, just listen to the patronizing tone, speaking to her like she's a moron. Like, okay, now, how many people, just listen to the tone. It's just revolting.
How many people does our dairy and beef industry feed?
I'm not exactly sure, but I do know that most of the industrial farming in New Zealand is actually exported overseas. So most of it doesn't even feed New Zealanders.
So are we happy if people overseas go hungry?
I don't think that if we aren't eating beef, we can't be producing other
Good
crops.
answer.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that people overseas are going hungry. They could just begin to produce crops locally and begin to eat locally as well, which would be much more sustainable.
So they need to feed themselves.
Really, roll my eyes while I say that. It's already revolting in my opinion. It's just gross. Now remember, 16 years old, it's aspirational. They've got these ideas. They want to investigate. You spoke to a 16-year-old in 1981. So how are you going to stop apartheid? I don't know, but I want to get out here in the streets and say no to segregation. Well, but how are you going to stop it? Oh, but so you're okay with them losing their workers? How are you going to do it? You don't. They're young people who are aspirational and trying to give something a go. Got a couple of questions I'm going to play for you because I just wanted to show you the tone of the interview and the ridiculous nature of the conversation. And then I'll play you the bit that I might have to leave the room for. Probably have to take my headphones off. So she's asking, Heather du Plessis-Allan is asking Izzy about where are we going to make money? Just where? And look, you may agree or disagree with Izzy's response that maybe we don't have to focus on beef. I'm paraphrasing, but it's actually an okay answer. Maybe there's other ways to feed the world. My paraphrase, So, but Heather du Plessis-Allan goes on to try and make a fool of her and try and nail her down.
So, what are we going to do then if we're not sending our dairy and beef overseas to try to make some money to pay for you to go to school? What are we going to make money from, Izzy?
Because your parents are farmers to pay for you to go to school. It's like, this is not what we're talking about. Another question here. And this is the part that goes into the ugly, but there's two more clips. The first one's short because another one of their demands is about air travel. And I get it. There's a lot of climate change activists who want to stop air travel, stop the emissions going into the environment through planes. And so one of their demands is about air travel and unnecessary air travel. So Heather du Plessis-Allan asks her a question around that.
Izzy, how do you ban unnecessary air travel, which is one of your demands? How do you okay, so I'm going to fly up for a conference. I think that's necessary. Do you think that's necessary?
No, I do not.
How do we ban that? Who's going to be the guy who stands there and goes, Heather, you're banned. Who's going to be that person?
I'll say again, in the 1960s, 70s, and 70s, if a 16-year-old was in the street protesting against the Vietnam War, do you think they had all the answers? Oh, so how are you going to stop the draft? I don't fucking know. I just want to stop the war. Or how are we going to do? I don't know. I want the planet to be alive in 100 years from now. I'm 16. I don't want to be dismissive to Izzy either. But you know what I'm saying? It's like this is a 16-year-old who is trying on please, I'm not being patronizing to 16-year-olds, but trying on for size the political leanings and the desire that this particular individual wants for the future. They may change in 5 years from now. She may have answers to those questions in 10 years from now. She's 16. Now, this is the bit that I got furious about. And because of the system that I'm using, I can't stop it. It's 1:44. How do I ask this of you? If this was your 16-year-old being spoken to by a grown-ass woman who is a professional journalist and a broadcaster, I'd like to know how you would feel once your 16-year-old got off the phone. That's all I'll say. So basically that question about air travel was a setup. She was setting her up because she'd been looking through her Instagram pages, well, allegedly, this is what the mother has asserted, because Izzy was recently in Fiji on a plane to get to Fiji. So Heather du Plessis-Allan sets her up and then embarrasses her. And it's the laughter that's the worst part for me. The laughter. So demeaning.
Am I allowed to go to Fiji? Is that necessary?
In the current climate crisis, I don't think that that's necessary.
When was the last time you were on a plane?
I'm not sure. Maybe a few months ago, to be honest.
Where'd you go?
Fiji.
Izzy! Izzy! Don't you care about the climate, Izzy?
Of course I care about the climate.
Not enough. You went to... You went to Fiji. Izzy, come on, mate. Are you serious? Are you serious, Izzy?
No, it's pretty
are you still there?
It is pretty ironic, but to be honest, it's not really a trip that I wanted to go on, but I can't really get out of it.
Why'd you go? Why'd you go?
My parents wanted to go.
Izzy,
I didn't want to go.
How are you embarrassed that your parents did that to the planet and then forced you to do it as well?
Of course I'm not embarrassed.
Did you have a terrible time?
Not really. I didn't have to do anything.
See, I'm sorry, mate. Listen, you're such a champion. I think you've got a brilliant future ahead of you. And are you doing another strike soon?
I'll just demean you one more time.
Yeah,
though.
we'll look to.
Good. I will talk to you again. I might get you back on the show. Izzy Cook, who's a school strike for climate Wellington organizer. Anyway, Rod Orham's going to be with us on a similar subject.
Honestly, I'll be real. In your in the comments, you're a 55-year-old parent at this stage. You've got or a 50-year-old parent or a 45-year-old parent, and you've got a 16-year-old daughter who's standing up for what she believes in. Forget if you do or you don't or whatever the cause is. And that's the response from a seasoned journalist, mother of one, broadcaster on the most powerful media outlet in the country. I'm ropeable again. If I was in a radio station now, I'd need to play some ads. Honestly, it's just one of the most repugnant things. And I've heard some fucking repugnant things. I've probably done some fucking repugnant things, but it's one of the most repugnant things I've ever heard of a broadcaster. It's just disgusting. It's repulsive. And if she hasn't already apologized and mea culpa, hearing it again, I think I will be making a complaint to the Broadcasting Standards Authority, and I think probably there will be a lot of people who will. I'm not encouraging you to. I'm not interested in doing like a pile-on, but I think I'm going to, because it was absolutely revolting. Absolutely revolting. That's the standard of journalism. That's the standard. Actually, no. That's the character of the person who is the feature host on the afternoons in News Talk ZB. Fuck the journalism. That's the character of the person. Grown-ass woman, mother, journalist, speaks to a 16-year-old lad. Agree or disagree? Like, let's say it's your child, your grandchild, your sibling who believes in something that you don't believe, but they get treated like that on the radio. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. Well, now that you've heard it, let's have a look what Izzy's mum had to say. So this was the article that was in the Spinoff, and you can go and read this for yourself. It's headed up. Heather Plessis-Allan should be ashamed of how she bullied my daughter. And I just want to kind of read you the last bit because it talks through what's been going on. It says that, Heather Plessis-Allan doesn't give a shit about climate change. Well, that's an opinion. I don't know, but it's not really the point. Let me just read you this last bit. Here's what Plessis-Allan chose to focus on when she spoke to Izzy on Friday, that she had flown to Fiji with me in July. Plessis-Allan had done her research, aka checking out my daughter's Instagram to discredit her personally and derail the conversation about climate action. It's a very good point. So the conversation is now no longer about what she's looking for and what she's talking about. It's attack journalism, basically. The irony here is that Izzy didn't even want to come. She wanted to stay home and study and hang out with her friends. She's a teenager, but selfishly, I insisted because I wanted to spend time with her. Of course, none of this counts for anything. Yes, Izzy took 2 flights in 3 years. She also lives a low-carbon lifestyle. She's vegetarian, uses public transport, and buys secondhand. Why aren't we talking about the fact that we ship most of our commodities around the country by truck, not rail, or how the agriculture sector, our largest emitter, is still not paying for carbon emissions, and that when the ETS is finally enforced in 2025, we can expect that agriculture will be heavily subsidized. The conversation needs to be about radically reimagining the way we live, building sustainable communities, and producing and consuming locally, not gotchas and petty point scoring. 100% agree with that last point. These last 2 paragraphs, or last 2 lines, I think are really important. Our young people are genuinely terrified about the world they are inheriting. That is what matters. Heather Plessis-Allan became a mother this year. I hope no one ever speaks to her child the way she did to mine. It's gone further. Julianne Genter, who I texted this afternoon, but we didn't get a chance to get her on, put out this tweet, I think, in the weekend. It is bullshit to shame people for living in a world reliant on fossil fuels. Anyone who does this, that's Heather Plessis-Allan's tag there, is trying to silence advocacy for a systemic policy changes to protect our planet. You don't need to be perfect to be on the right side of history. That might be, I guess, referencing the flight, especially a young person who is still at school, who has no hand in creating this fossil fuel dependent system. Young people have every right to call for us adults to sort it out now. We don't have time to wait. They need us to be responsible. And this is one of the things, and look, I don't want to say this is a yay me thing because it's not that at all. But I because I just spoke this, so if you're just joining us, this is a 19-year-old called Jet Kraginski who's going for mayor in Dunedin. Now, with the greatest respect to Jet, he didn't really have all the numbers and things at his fingertips when I was saying, that's great for transport. How do we pay for it? So we changed the interview slightly, and I'll just. Maybe I am saying yay me, fuck it, whatever. Listen to the tone change that we went through, because there was no point, because I could have completely embarrassed Jet and made him say, I don't know the whole time. But as a 19-year-old aspirational man who is trying to find his identity in politics, who has maybe not got fully formed ideas yet, but has sort of an inspirational platform. So this is the route we went. I'm interested because I don't want to do here, Jet, is kind of ask you, like I would with a counsellor. So like with a counsellor, I'd be like, well, what are the costings? And, tell me about that. And what's the budget? And because obviously people like you and Mandy and Bill Atkin and those people who aren't in council, it's a different conversation.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean,
So I don't want to sort of ask you questions that are going to cause you to be like, oh, I don't know, because I'm not trying to put this up as a conversation of, hey, let's see what Jet doesn't know. That's not what we're trying to do. But I guess what I'm wondering is, do you see your candidacy as more kind of an inspirational, like, this is who I would be and these are the kinds of things I would bring and these are the kinds of things I would try and do, but I need to get into the seat before I'm able to figure out exactly how to do it?
Yeah, I feel like,
so anyway, that we don't need to go into it, but it's not difficult when you're speaking to a younger person who maybe doesn't have all their fully formed ideas yet to be able to go, well, it's like I said, do you honestly think getting a 16-year-old in 1981 on the radio and going, so how are you going to solve apartheid? They're going to have a fucking clue? Or in the 1970s, so what are you going to do about the draft? Are they going to have a fucking clue? No, they're young people who are looking to the future and wanting something better. So I'm disgusted. I mean, I used to work at News Talk ZB. I'm disappointed, because it's you know, I don't have a loyalty to the station, but you know, it's like a place that I enjoyed and liked working and liked to be at. And I look to the people who are doing those sorts of jobs now, and I just think, why, radio gods, why? Because I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. All right, some comments that have been coming in. I guess I could keep going on about this. Do I have anything else? Let me just. What was that one? Oh, that was a different story. That was Heather Plessis-Allan. That was Heather Plessis-Allan. But now you've heard it, and you may not hear that anywhere else because, as I said, ZB I think has stripped their website. Jay says, I wonder if Izzy was a male, if Heather would have been less likely to mock and monster her. I think probably the thing about Izzy, she was 16. I think if it was a 16-year-old boy, a male, then probably my guess is probably would have got the same sort of pushback, but who knows? Rob says, I think referring to Heather Plessis-Allan as a journalist is very generous. Well, I guess when I talk about being a journalist, I like watching those First Amendment audits out of America where everyone calls themselves a citizen journalist. When I talk about journalist, I guess I'm talking about the qualification of journalism. Like, I'm not a journalist. I don't have that qualification. I wouldn't call myself a journalist. She does. She has worked as a journalist, yada, yada, yada. Free Soldier says, what a fab kid. I'd be so proud of her. Du Plessis should be ashamed. Yep, I typically agree with that. Again, I want to explain to the manager about how Pat referred to her as a journalist. Once again, great commentary. David says, this is moving too quick for me now. Appeal to hypocrisy, commonly employed as a red herring because it takes the heat off someone having to defend their argument and instead shifts to the focus back onto the person making the criticism. Yep, and there are a lot of people who agree in the chat who are agreeing with that. Christine says, I agree the interview was absolutely disgusting and childish. As adults, our job is to empower them, not belittle them publicly. And Free Soul wants to bring out our Karen Du Plessis-Allan, I should say. Fair enough. We don't need to get petty either, although I'm allowed to because I don't have a boss. No mainstream media here. All right, guys. What we're going to do now is have a conversation about. Oh, you know what we'll do? All right. We'll do something else first because this conversation might continue on a little bit and I don't really want to just stop it immediately. I want to give you the chance to continue it on because I've got an interview to play for you, and the interview is about STV. And the reason we're doing it is because there has been some misconceptions going around about what STV is and FPP, first past the post, is. For those of you who are in an area where STV counts, and this will be of great interest to you, it's with a professor out of Victoria University, because what's happening around the country is there are people saying do not rank to candidates that they don't want to see. Typically the Voices for Fuckwits group. They're saying do not rank, do not rank, do not rank, do not rank. Now, that's because there are people who are making those conversations who actually don't want those people to get into politics. I guess my commentary there is not based on that, but I'm based on what people are saying on the internet. Now there's a new thought that goes out that if you're using STV, you should rank the people you don't want to get in last. So here in Dunedin, for example, there's 11 mayors, one mayor, 11 candidates. So if there's one particular person who you really don't want to get in, you should list all 11 of them and put them at number 11. There's conflicting information going around the internet. So I wanted to clear it up for myself, for others as well, about how it all works. And especially with that question, if you don't want someone to get in, is it best to leave them blank? So, person A, B, C, D, and then the rest of them you leave blank? Or is it best to list them all and put the person you don't want to get in dead last? So in other words, do you go, well, here's my top three, 1, 2, 3. Here's my bottom three, 11, 10, 9, and then just fill out the rest in the middle sort of thing. So that conversation's coming up, but because there's still chat going on, once I play that, the chat will kind of slow down because we'll be doing other things. So before we do that, I'll give you a chance if anyone else wants to respond to that by going into the other story of the night, which I was going to talk about. It won't be a long one. It's basically talking about the poll results from TVNZ tonight. Interesting results. Got national staying the same. Labour going up a smidge, teeny bit within margin of error. Jacinda going up a smidge. Luxon coming down. What does it all mean? Well, we can talk about that. You guys can share your views on that as well. But first of all, let's have a look to the story and find out what the situation is with the polls on TVNZ tonight.
It's been a turbulent few weeks in the halls of power, so let's take a look at where the numbers have landed. National is steady on 37, no change from our poll 7 weeks ago. Labour is up 1 on 34, both ACT and the Greens are sitting on 9, New Zealand First is steady on 3, and Te Pāti Māori stays on 2. Let's look at some of the other parties now, and there's a long list. The Opportunities Party has dipped to 1. New Conservative, Democrats for Social Credit and Vision New Zealand are all steady on 1, and these parties are also making an appearance. The Legalised Cannabis Party, Outdoors and Freedom Party and Heartland New Zealand are all on 1 apiece, so a lot of smaller players starting to register. Time now to turn our attention to the debating chamber over here.
Just quietly, I'm a little bit freaked out by these graphics. They're so good, it does actually look like that if she steps too close to the edge, she might fall off. It does freak me out just a little bit.
And look at how these numbers translate to seats in Parliament. These 49 seats here in blue belong to National. Add in 12 yellow seats from ACT, you get 61, the magic number, which means National and ACT could form a government. On the other side, with 2 seats from Te Pāti Māori, 12 from the Greens over here, and Labour's 45, add those together, you get 59. That's not enough. They'd be sitting in the opposition benches after the next election. Let's bring up the preferred Prime Minister numbers now. No change for Jacinda Ardern, sitting on 30. Christopher Luxon has dipped slightly to 21. David Seymour is on 4. Winston Peters still making an appearance. And 2 Green MPs and National's deputy leader are also in the mix.
It's a really interesting stat, that, right? Because for all the noise you hear around the place about the, from the right in particular, about, Labour going backwards and Labour not doing, losing New Zealand, yada, yada, pretty much 1 in 3 New Zealanders still want Jacinda Ardern to be the Prime Minister. So it's always intriguing when one party is doing and saying they're terrible, yet 1 in 3 New Zealanders want Jacinda Ardern to be the Prime Minister, and only 1 in 5 New Zealanders want Christopher Luxon to be Prime Minister. Also interesting to know that Christopher Luxon's gone, it's only 1%, let's not get too bad, but look, Christopher Luxon's dropped, Jacinda Ardern is held, Labour's gone up, and National is held. It's really, it's an interesting number, albeit, let's be blunt and let's be fair, that doesn't mean very much this far out from the election, but you're watching trends, and I think the trends might be at the moment that National is peaking a little bit. They're at about their ceiling, and Labour is coming up a little bit. But as is the usual situation, not last time around because of COVID, but as is the usual situation, there will probably be a balance of power somewhere, and it will probably be the Māori Party, or potentially, and I know that if you say his name 3 times, he turns up in the mirror behind you, Winston Peters, something in the middle that could get there. It won't be anyone else, but it could be one of those 2 to get there. And I also think about these situations, and I always think Don Brash, audio speech, which was about 15 months out, and they got a massive spike, and then they just spent the next 15 months just slowly coming down, and then Labour got in again. Now, I'm not predicting that. I actually don't have a clue what's going to happen in this upcoming election. I think it'll be a razor's edge. And either it could go either way, unless, for example, something happens and we see a lot more closely, closer to the election. But we're still a year away. Let's just get to the end of this.
So, a year out from the election, this is where the parties and politicians are sitting. Christopher Luxon is clearly up for a fight and scrapping to be the next Prime Minister. And on these numbers, he'll be fancying his chances, sniffing the mood for change.
People feel the country's going in the wrong direction, and I agree with that. It needs to be turned around and sorted out.
So it's that statement. People think the country's going in the wrong direction. Well, 1 in 3 people still want Jacinda Ardern to lead the country, whereas 1 in 5 want Christopher Luxon to lead the country. And this is the shell game we talk about all the time. And what's the truth and what's not. No one's suggesting that Labour is going to be as popular as they were last time round. I mean, we predicted that the day after the election they wouldn't get in with a majority. But do they? Do people realise the country's going in the wrong direction? Then why is she not on 20% and he not on 30%?
Last 2 weeks, Jacinda Ardern has been playing to her strengths on the world stage, visiting both London and New York. And for the first time since December 2020, Labour is up, but only a fraction.
You're right, I have spent some time with other leaders, and relative to other countries, whilst the whole world is going through a very difficult period, New Zealand has greater cause for optimism than most.
The trouble for National is that even after 5 years in the job, nearly half of voters are still feeling those positive vibes. We asked, if you could only choose between Jacinda Ardern and Christopher Luxon, who would you prefer as Prime Minister? 47% say Jacinda Ardern and 41% pick Christopher Luxon. The rest don't know or refuse to say. We asked the same question in March. Jacinda Ardern is up slightly and Christopher Luxon.
So that's that trend. Like, I'm not saying it's a massive increase for Labour, but it's a very, very slight. And for National, it's a very, very either peaking or dropping a little bit. So it's interesting to see what will happen in the next one, to see if this is an anomaly or if that trend is starting to happen.
Luxon's support is fading. National's leader says people don't know him yet, and he's not fazed his personal numbers are going the wrong way.
No, I think we've made tremendous progress. If you just think about where we were a year ago, we've got a new leader, a new party. Here we are being able to form government off the back of these results.
Add to the mix, both leaders have had MP dramas in the last few weeks. Gaurav Sharma has become an independent MP, and Sam Uffindell is back in the fold. ACT and the Greens are still riding high, both offering big chunks of support, despite the Greens' co-leader re-election distraction. It's up to the Prime Minister to decide when we head to the ballot box.
There's always been a tradition at the beginning of the election year to announce when the election will be. I intend to stick with that tradition.
In this poll, there's a big 13% who don't know how they'll vote or refuse to say. They're up for grabs by all parties.
There you go. Cancel. So there you go. So it's interesting numbers. The numbers don't mean much at the minute, let's be honest, but trends can mean something, and the trend could be National peaking. They're at the crest of the hill. They could be just coming down a little bit. I mean, there's nothing to say that they won't continue up, but at the moment, the trend seems to be cresting or dropping a tiny bit, and Labour seems to be rising a tiny bit. And I think this election, the one thing I would be prepared to sort of commit to is it will probably come down to a couple of percent. I think that's probably a pretty fair, guesstimate. Right, I told you the chats will still go. That's why we wanted to play that, so we could do this for you now before we go into the feature interview of tonight. Kim says, this is Heather Plessis-Allan, I guess they, radio, are needing to be more extreme to get ratings. Speaking of the upcoming STV conversation, Simon says, as someone who previously voted an STV election in the Republic of Ireland, my preference is not to rank anyone you don't want to vote for, but I could be wrong. We talk about Ireland with the professor shortly, so we'll have a look at that. Rob speaks of my definition of journalist, and I agree with you, Rob, that it is a appeal to authority, but is also accurate as well. I mean, I'm perfectly happy to say I work in the journalistic field. For me, I do the work of a journalist at times, but I'm not a journalist. Kuki says to rank or not to rank, an important pragmatic piece of knowledge. Well, you'll get the answer to that piece of knowledge shortly. And I think this is about, the teenagers. What angered me most was the right-wing mocking on Twitter. And these days of teenagers dealing with bullying online, I was appalled. Yeah, I saw a bit of that, speaking of Sean Plunkett. And I'm surprised that someone hasn't, I'm surprised actually, it wasn't really vicious, but Twitter can be so sensitive to these things. I'm surprised that it didn't require some kind of withdrawal from him, but yeah, maybe just me. And finally, for this part of the conversation, I think Don Brash was a better leader of National than Christopher Luxon, says Simon. All right, guys. So what we're going to do now is have a look at STV and the voting process. We're coming up to local body elections. As I said, there's conversations that have been going on about how STV works and what's better. It's also a conversation around the voting system in general. Like, should we be using first past the post? Should we be using STV? What should it be? I got a chance to speak to Professor John Fraenkel from University of Victoria Wellington, or University of Wellington, Victoria University of Wellington, whatever they've changed their name to at the moment. And we talked a little bit about specifically STV and about the voting systems and what would be the best to see happen here in New Zealand. And we are going to play that for you now, and I will see you in about 15 minutes at the end of the conversation. He is a professor of comparative politics, School of History, Philosophy, Political Sciences, and International Relations. Welcome to the show, Professor John Fraenkel from Victoria University. Evening, John. Thanks for joining us.
Hi.
Now, I've got you on because I've been having conversations over the weekend with people here in Dunedin. We use the STV voting block. And I wasn't aware until I just looked up today, actually, that there are fewer places using STV than I was aware of, but it is getting used for local body elections around the country. And I feel like there's some people are a little bit unclear about some of the options here. But before we jump into that, because you are someone who has looked at STV, how it's used in Ireland, I think you've studied how it was used in Malta. And if I'm correct, did you advise against it being used in Tonga, or have you read about how it was advised against being used in Tonga?
No, I published an article and worked with the Tongan Ministry of Justice back in 2008. I was an election observer at that election, and I also advised against the use of the single transfer, but simply on the grounds of complexity. I'm not against its use in New Zealand in local government. It's just that in Tonga, they count the ballots using a very simple first past the post system, and they count them at the village level, and that creates a certain kind of confidence in the election. Everyone knows who's got votes, why they got votes. It's all done at a very local level. Whereas with the single transferable vote, you by definition have to aggregate the votes, because all single transferable vote always uses multi-member constituencies. When it's only got one member, as for example for the Maori ward here in Wellington, it's not called the single transferable vote, it's called the alternative vote system.
But is it still the single transferable vote process?
Well, no, not quite, because the single transferable vote process with only one member is the alternative vote.
Okay.
What I mean by that is that the threshold if you've only got one member is 50%. Anyone that gets over 50% gets elected. Anyone that doesn't get elected. There's no you can have elimination of candidates under the alternative vote, but you don't have one of the distinct features under the single transferable vote system, which is that if one member gets over the threshold, their extra votes are redistributed in accordance with second preferences. That doesn't happen with the alternative vote. It only happens with the single transferable vote system.
Gotcha. Do you think, I mean, if we're going to talk about how local body politics are being elected, do we need to cover off first past the post and the pros and cons of that? Or is that pretty clear with most people, the person with the most vote wins, full stop?
Well, I mean, that is the simple reality of first past the post. It's simple to vote. It's simple to count. The person with the most votes wins, but that can mean winning with less than a majority. Yeah. It can mean winning even if you're not the most broadly supported candidate. The single transferable vote system was introduced for local government elections in New Zealand because of a perception that first past the post wasn't delivering the best possible candidates. It's also used in Scotland in local government elections for the same sort of reason.
Do you think that perception is accurate, that it was delivering not the best possible candidates?
I mean, you'd have to ask a New Zealand specialist to comment on something like that.
Fair enough.
I'm an international specialist and a Pacific specialist. I wasn't around in New Zealand at the time when those debates were happening. I mean, there are discussions about the relative merits of these different systems. My concerns in Tonga were about the complexity of the system in that context, and about the confidence in the system when ballots are counted at the local level. That's not the case in New Zealand. There's no reason why one should use those kind of objections to object to the system being used in New Zealand.
Gotcha. For people, I mean, we are talking mostly about single transferable vote because, to be honest, this is a Dunedin-based program, although we go nationwide, well, internationally, obviously. But also, first past the post seems to be pretty clear. You might get a winner with only 40 or 35% of the vote, but it seems pretty clear. The person with the biggest slice of the pie wins. single transferable vote, although it seems pretty clear, and this is actually an article from 2019, but it's got a lovely graphic, which I think explains it very nicely from the ODT, because we had it here in 2019, that you rank in order of preference your candidates. So in the example that we're looking at on the screen, Andy Apple got 1 vote, Wendy Watermelon got ranked second. I don't mean 1 vote, sorry, ranked first. Wendy Watermelon got ranked second. Barry Banana got ranked third. Susie Strawberry got ranked fourth, and so on and so on and so on. Which means, and you can probably explain this better than I, when you in the first round of voting, this is how I understand it. You correct me. If no one gets over 50%, the lowest score getter, the lowest person on the ballot gets dropped off. Their votes get redistributed, and then you go to the next round to see if someone gets over 50%. Is that basically how we find a conclusion?
Not quite, close, but not quite. The threshold for the alternative vote is 50% when you've only got 1 vacancy to be filled. With the single transferable vote, the threshold varies depending on the number of vacancies that you've got to get filled and the number of voters. It's a formula called the Droop quota, which we don't need to go into, but gets calculated that will tell you exactly, I don't know what it is in Dunedin or Wellington for that matter, it tells you exactly how many votes you need in order to cross that threshold. So if, say, Andy Apple, who's first on that ballot, say Andy Apple gets sufficient votes, let's say the Droop quota is, say, 15% in order to get elected. If Andy Apple gets first preferences in 15% of the cases, he will be elected. If he gets first preference in 30% of cases, he'll use up the 15%, and then the extra 15% will go to other candidates, depending on who's listed second preference on the ballot paper.
Wow, it's actually sounds quite problematic. It sounds like difficult to understand. Because I mean, the way I've been thinking about it is I'm not a huge Formula One fan, but it seems to be the example of what, when you have a season of racing, is that someone who finishes second in every race is likely to win the overall season, because maybe the person, 20 other people come first at various times, but if you finish consistently second overall, you're probably going to get enough points to win the season. And I mean, is that a fair sort of analogy for this, or do the first ranking votes carry more weight and make the first ranking votes to be more likely to determine who the winner is in the outcome?
Well, there is a Pacific country that does have a system like that now, tiny Nauru with only 10,000 people, and they value a first preference as 1 and a second preference as half. But no, that's not the case in New Zealand. Under the New Zealand system, every ballot is worth the same. And yes, it is possible for a candidate who gets very few first preferences to get elected largely on second preferences. In my experience, that's quite rare. Usually, some popular candidates get a lot of first preferences, and those surpluses are handed on to other candidates. So the best way to think about STV is that single transferable vote is that it involves candidates competing to get to a certain threshold, the Droop quota, say 15%, and the redistribution of surplus ballots to other candidates if they get over 15%, plus the knocking off of lowest polling candidates one by one until you fill all of the vacancies, which is usually 2 or 3.
It makes it such a different equation to think about. Now, you're saying Droop. Do you know how to spell it? D-R-U-P-E, D-R-O-O-P? Because I want to do some research on it.
D-R-O-O-P, the Droop quota.
The Droop quota. Because if it was like 20%, now I'm thinking statistically, or sorry, not statistically, but I guess critically or logically, if it was 20% and there was a popular mayoralty candidate, which there's only one position for, that I wanted to support, would that therefore mean giving someone else my first vote might make sense, because they're going to go beyond the Droop quota anyway if it was a small number?
Well, in Northern Ireland, sometimes people do try and ensure that a lot of their candidates get a lot of first preferences, because if you stack a lot of first preferences on one extremely popular candidate, it's possible that the other candidates get knocked out during the process of elimination. So sometimes people strategize around that. Yeah, the strategy of how to vote. It's a strange thing to strategize around something that's a bit difficult to understand, or that we don't have the numbers to, i.e. the Droop quota.
So how do you actually make a strategy for that is perplexing. One of the things that's going around the internet at the moment, and this is really what I want to be clear on from you or from anyone that can help us out with this. I had a conversation with someone in the weekend, and we were talking about not ranking people. So we're talking about Dunedin Mayor, right? That's as the example. There's 11 candidates for Dunedin Mayor. There's one position. And we were talking about, because there's a lot of feedback from people who are doing their own private research on people and saying, do not rate this person. In other words, leave them off the ballot altogether. Yet I'm now hearing and reading in places like Stuff, and we'll have a look at some of those things later on tonight, that ranking them near the bottom, so actually the person you don't want to have get in, if there is one person or two people that you're particularly concerned about them getting in Dunedin, you would rank them at 10 or 11, and that would be more effective to keep that person out than leaving them off. Do you have any knowledge in this? Are you able to clear this up for us at all? Because I think that's quite an important thing for people's strategy.
Well, firstly, if you're talking about an election where there's only one vacancy to be filled, it may be that people are using the term single transferable vote to describe that. But as I mentioned earlier, the single member district version of the STV system is called the alternative vote, and the threshold will be 50%. Anyone that gets over 50% will get in. There's a crucial difference between these systems in the northern and the southern hemisphere, except New Zealand is a bit different in that respect. In many parts of the world, particularly in the northern hemisphere, preferential voting systems are optional. In other parts of the world, preferential voting systems are compulsory. In other words, you have to rank order your candidates all the way down in order to cast a valid ballot. That was the case, e.g., in 99, 2001, 2006, and it was the case. It still is the case in Papua New Guinea, where they have to rank 3 preferences. When you have a compulsory, and many Australian states also have preferential voting systems where you have to rank preferences, or your ballot is considered invalid. Under those kind of circumstances, strategizing about exactly where you place your candidates becomes extremely important. And and a lot of people do proceed by putting their first preference first, and then the person that's most likely to beat their first preference last, and then filling ballots in the middle, a kind of negative ranking thing. That happens quite a lot in even in Nauru. You can see examples of that kind of thing happening. With an optional preferential voting system such as you have in New Zealand, you can rank 1, you can rank 1, 2, you can rank 1, 2, 3, you can rank 1, 2, 4. You can put a complete ranking. The lower preferences are very unlikely to come into play and are likely to make really only a marginal difference. So I think the best advice that could be given is to rank as many candidates as you have a genuine preference for, and don't rank the ones below that.
So let's say that I knew, I've been lucky, I've interviewed, or I am going to interview all 11 candidates. So I've had dealings with all of them, so I could probably make a decision of 11. But are you saying that, let's say after you get 5 or 6 down, because there's 11 candidates for only one position, that would involve, if I rank 6 down, that would involve having to get to the 6th round of trying to find 50.1% before those votes would be allocated to someone?
No. The number of rounds of the count is totally different to the number of candidates you rank on the ballot paper. It's highly probable that your lower order rankings will never come into the equation.
Yeah.
If your first preference or your second preference or your third preference are for the top supported candidates, those lower preferences will never be counted at all. There's no relationship between the number of counts and the number of
what I was asking was, if it got to the 6th round, like if still after 5 rounds you didn't have a 50% winner, let's put it another way. If I only ranked 2 people and after the second round it still wasn't 50%, what would happen with my other 9 people who I haven't ranked? Like, would they get any benefit from not ranking them, seeing I've only ranked 2 and left the other 9 blank, if after the first couple of rounds we're still not at 50%? So in other words, all my votes are done after choice 1, choice 2. Does it matter after that, or could you just does it not make any preference or benefit for either getting people in or not getting people in to not rank Yeah, if the vote is still going on.
Your ballot will not be counted until the second preferences on your ballot will not be counted until the first preference shown on your ballot is eliminated. So if your first preference was for Andy Apple in the example you showed before, and then Andy Apple at some stage ends up with the lowest tally of ballots, he will be eliminated, and your ballot will go to Wendy Watermelon, who's your second preference there. And if Wendy Watermelon gets eliminated, it'll go to Barry Banana, and so on. It works. Your ballot, the people, and the counting agents will only start looking at your ballot for second preferences once your first preference is eliminated. Now, just to give you an example, of the way lower order preferences can make a major difference.
Please.
I've studied in a lot of detail because it was politically very important. The Fiji election of 1999. In the Fiji election of 1999, there were two sort of large parties, the Rambukan Party, the coup leader, and the Fiji Labour Party. And a lot of people who supported the Fiji, Rambuka's party put the Fiji Labour Party last, and vice versa. And a lot of the ballots, because those were the two main contenders, where one was eliminated, it was the one that was second last that got the ballot, and vice versa. Right?
Wow.
So that can lead to all sorts of kind of weird results where I didn't want that person at all. I put them second to last. But if you put the biggest supported two candidates last and second last, your ballots will go to the second to last ranked candidate. It's one of the weird things about that system.
Okay, but so we're clear, because like in Dunedin, and I won't say who they are because I don't want to influence anyone, there's basically 4 people who are likely candidates for mayor out of the 11.
Yes.
Really, because there's 4 of them that needing to get 50%, it's unlikely that any 4 of those will be eliminated before the lower ranked people, the other 7. So actually, if your first rank gets allocated after they get eliminated, if you're voting for one of those 4, and I think obviously most people are, I'm not trying to tell them what to do, it's unlikely that your vote is going to get eliminated because they're likely to be there at the end because they're going to be the most popular 4.
Yeah. So you may have a preference for those 3 candidates that are not likely to get elected, but what really matters when you cast your vote is the order in which you place those 4 candidates that are likely to be elected. And your vote is highly likely to be your 4th preference. So ignoring the 3 that are unlikely to get elected, the one you place 4th is likely to get your ballot first. And then if they're eliminated, the next one.
So that would therefore mean if someone, let's say of those 4 people, if someone didn't want the 4th person to get in, then they should rank them down at 6, 7, 8, or 9.
Yes, or not rank them at all. And I mean,
not at all.
That's unlikely to make a major difference. I mean, there are some people who would suggest you should rank down to the very last one and leave the last one unranked. There are others that would suggest that you should rank all the way down. But I don't know about you. I mean, you say you have got a preference for all 7 candidates in this election. I've never been in an election where I could rank all of the candidates personally.
No, I don't know if I have a preference for them all, but I guess what I'm saying is I'm probably one of the few people in Dunedin who's managed to spend an hour and a half with all 11 candidates. So probably, maybe almost apart from anybody else, I've probably spoken to more of them for more hours than anyone else in Dunedin. Perhaps. Okay. So that kind of brings us back to that original question of rank them last or don't rank them at all. In practicality, doesn't make a huge difference.
No, I don't think makes a huge difference. What's important is the order in which you place the leading candidates, meaning by the leading candidates, the candidates that are most likely to get the largest share of the vote. And most people who are interested in elections know, in a national election, we all know the Labour candidate, the national candidate is likely to get the largest share of the votes in many constituencies. Those would, if you were using STV at the national level, those would be the key parties to consider where you place them. Of course, at the local government elections, it's more individual centred rather than party centred.
do you personally have a preference for first past the post or STV when it comes to New Zealand local body elections? Like, do you look around and think this would be better or this is better?
I don't think STV has been a failure for New Zealand. It's a sophisticated voting system that allows for expression of a greater degree of voter choice. People also like STV because there are less wasted votes. With first past the post, if you know what counts is the votes for the top candidate, and everyone else's vote is sort of wasted. Whereas STV is a proportional system. It works out. It's a very individual candidate-centered system, but it is a proportional system. So it ensures that the various parties are represented more or less in proportion to their share in the vote. There are advantages to that kind of system.
Very good. From the School of History, Philosophy, Political Science and International Relations from Victoria University, Professor John Fraenkel. John, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your thoughts on that and helping us try and figure this whole thing out.
Pleasure. You could, if you want, you can add in a logo with a droop quota. I didn't want to try
the droop quota though, but what you're saying is for the mayoralty, it's basically 50.1%. That's the number. Yeah. One position.
I'm unfamiliar with this. In fact, I didn't realise that you were talking from Dunedin because I just quickly mugged up on the constituency size in Wellington, thinking that that's where you were talking about. But it's four three-member constituencies, one two-member constituency, and one one-member constituency. So, in my view, that one-member constituency would be run according to the alternative vote, in the way that electoral specialists explain it.
Yeah. Very good. Hey, look, thank you so much. This has been very helpful, and I'm sure it's been helpful to the audience as well.
Pleasure.
All righty, Mighty. Now, look, to be honest, there's still a little bit of... I wanted to try and do something that would give everyone, like, the answer. And I think what we've got is a lot closer to the answer. So it seems that really either ranking down the list or not at all makes not very much difference. Practically, theoretically, it might make a difference, but in the practical application of counting votes, it won't make a huge difference. Someone's made mention in the text about the 15% being a bit weird. I got a bit lost there as well, but I'm pretty sure what he means is if there was 8 people applying, if there was 8 positions, sorry, like if your council had 8 positions, then I'm assuming that means the droop number will be about 12 or 13, because that would be 1/8 of 100. So I think the droop number, that's how they probably work it out. Whereas we were talking about the mayoralty, which is only 1 position, which is a 50-50 thing. So I think that's why there's some unclearness there. A-hole says, one of the things that sticks out to me about STV isn't it a bit of a lottery? Because not all the 30% that voted for the first candidate to meet the quota would have the same rankings. So therefore, was there a second one there? A-hole? I didn't really see it. I'll have to go, unless it's a long comment. That's all that we got coming in, sorry. I apparently have to stop using sporting analogies. If I stop using sporting analogies, I've got no analogies left. I think Australia uses STV. I think they used to alternate vote system. Paul says the bonus system in rugby championship. And Kookie says thumbs. Thanks, Pat. I guess that's maybe the... Oh, did you hear something? What did I say, Nala? I said thumbs. Thanks, Pat. Is that what you... Oh, you reacted to my name. Pat. Is that what you're reacting to? Okay, fair enough. I'm assuming that's the emoji, and for some reason, Kookie, it has said thumbs rather than... All right, guys, that's me for tonight. I'm assuming good on your Pursuit. Pursuit said that was very helpful. Thank you. Kookie said that was very helpful. Good. That's why I wanted to do it. That will be a clip tomorrow as well. And if you think others may find it helpful, that will be a great one to share around, because it's important that we know how the system works that we're working with. So if you want to do that, feel free. And other than that, I think we're done for tonight. I'm assuming that Chewy's going to be with us tomorrow night. We will pick up on that, the story from Sean Plunkett, who doesn't think that Brenton Tarrant is a terrorist and doesn't believe he was charged with terrorism. Maybe we'll just touch on that very quickly now, just to show you exactly what I mean. I've got so many windows open. Hang on. Where is it? That one's not that one, not that one, not that one, not that one. Is it that one? I think it is that one. Okay. Sorry. I just didn't want to show you my background because it's like showing someone your dirty room. Let's just go to Twitter. You can see all my Twitter now. Let's just go to my Twitter. Let's just go to tweets and replies. Let's just go to the tweet I put out because that's got the link on it. Here's the tweet. News Hub. Apparently, Sean Plunkett said that News Hub was going to do a hit piece on him tonight. To Sean Plunkett and to many, hit piece basically means something I don't agree with. So News Hub reported that Sean Plunkett said, quote, Brendan Tarrant was not convicted of terrorism. In the court findings, the sentence for Tarrant included, quote, life imprisonment on the charge of engaging in a terrorist act. Here is the article for yourself. I always believe in going to the source if you can. Let's go in there. And if I just go boom, Control F and go TERR, then I'll find it. Defendant Brendan Tarrant was charged with 51 murders, 40 attempted murders, and engaging in a terrorist act. It also says, 27th of August 2020, the offender was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for each of those 51 murders. He was also sentenced to concurrent terms of 12. So he got 12 years imprisonment on the 40 charges of attempted murder. And he also got life imprisonment on the charge of engaging in a terrorist act. So just going back to what Mr. Plunkett has said to have said on News Hub, have quoted him as saying was not convicted of terrorism. Right there, life imprisonment on the charge of engaging in a terrorist act. So I think we will pick up on that tomorrow night. There is also something, and I'm paraphrasing now, I don't want to be quoted as to saying there's something to do with people should be reading the manifesto for themselves. I just briefly read that on News Hub. I'm sure we'll find out more tomorrow whether that's an accurate quote or not, and I'm sure we'll pick up on that tomorrow night as well. All right, team. I'm Sean Plunkett thinks I'm being nasty towards him as well, by the way. I've had some communications with people over the weekend who are telling me that Sean Plunkett's been complaining about us being nasty to him. Poor old Karen, eh? I will leave it there for tonight. It looks like the dog is ready to go to bed. Are you ready? Oi, ready to go to bed? Do you want to go to bed? Off you go. Go to bed. Go on, off you go. You can go. There you go. She's going to bed. All right, team. I will see you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. Be safe through the day. And thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being a part of Big Hero News tonight. Hooroo from the Guru. See you next time. Bye-bye.